A teenage girl waits beside a quiet country road. She's wearing a simple dress. Her bicycle rests against a tree. She looks harmless, almost innocent. A German officer notices her from a distance and smiles. He believes she's waiting for someone, perhaps for him. Minutes later, both of them disappear into the forest. Only one walks back out. For decades, almost no one knew her name. The Nazis never expected one of their deadliest enemies to be a teenage girl with bright red hair and an easy smile. They searched for soldiers. They hunted armed resistance fighters. But they rarely suspected the young woman casually pedaling through occupied Holland. That mistake would cost them dearly. Her name was Freddie Oversteegen, one of the youngest resistance fighters in World War II. A girl who transformed innocence into one of the most dangerous weapons against Nazi occupation. But before she became every German officer's nightmare, she was simply a child trying to survive. Freddie Oversteegen was born in 1925 in Haarlem, the Netherlands. Her childhood wasn't wealthy. Far from it. She and her older sister Truus grew up in a modest home where money was scarce but compassion was abundant. Their mother believed that every person deserved help, no matter who they were. Homeless families often slept in their house. Political refugees shared meals at their table. To Freddie, kindness wasn't extraordinary. It was normal. She had no idea those same values would soon place her on a Gestapo kill list. Everything changed in May 1940. German forces invaded the Netherlands. Within days, the country surrendered. Nazi flags replaced Dutch ones. Curfews appeared. Jewish families began disappearing from neighborhoods. Freedom vanished almost overnight. Most people lowered their heads and tried to survive. Not Freddie's family. Her mother quietly joined the Dutch resistance. Their small home became a safe place for people fleeing Nazi persecution. Hidden visitors arrived after dark. Food ration cards were secretly shared. Messages passed from hand to hand. Freddie watched everything. She was only 14. One evening, two resistance members knocked on the family's door. They weren't looking for Freddie's mother. They wanted the daughters. The men studied Freddie and Truus carefully. "You girls look ordinary," one of them said. "That's exactly why we need you." Freddie exchanged a confused glance with her sister. What would we have to do? The answer would change her life forever. At first, the assignment seemed simple. Ride bicycles across town. Deliver sealed envelopes. Carry illegal newspapers hidden beneath groceries. Escort Jewish children to safe houses. Never ask questions. Never open the packages. Never tell anyone, not even close friends. The girls quickly learned that ordinary appearances were their greatest protection. German soldiers barely noticed teenage girls on bicycles. That invisibility became their greatest advantage. Every successful mission built confidence. Every mission also increased the risk. One afternoon, Freddie stopped beside a canal to hand a package to an elderly stranger. Before she could leave, German soldiers suddenly appeared around the corner. Her heart nearly stopped. The package contained forged identity documents. If they searched her bicycle, she would almost certainly be arrested. One soldier approached. He glanced at the young girl, then at her bicycle. "What are you doing here?" Freddie forced a smile. "Running an errand for my mother." The soldier looked at the basket. Fresh vegetables. Bread. Nothing unusual. He waved her away. She rode calmly until the soldiers disappeared behind her. Only then did she realize her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the handlebars. Most people would have stopped after an experience like that. Freddie didn't. Instead, she volunteered for more dangerous work. The resistance leaders noticed. So did her older sister. One night, during a secret meeting inside a farmhouse, a senior resistance commander unfolded a map across the table. "This war is changing," he said quietly. "Delivering messages isn't enough anymore." The room fell silent. Then he looked directly at Freddie. "We have a different assignment." She noticed something unusual. Nobody smiled. Nobody congratulated her. Instead, everyone seemed uncomfortable, almost guilty. Then came the sentence that would make Freddie one of the most feared young women in occupied Europe. "We need someone who can make German officers trust her, before leading them somewhere they will never return." Freddie didn't answer immediately. She looked around the room. No one avoided her eyes. They simply waited. Because once she accepted, there would be no turning back. She finally nodded. "I'll do it." The room fell silent. No applause. No celebration. Only the heavy realization that a 16-year-old girl had just volunteered for one of the most dangerous jobs in occupied Europe. The resistance changed her training overnight. She learned how to recognize German ranks, how to study patrol routes, how to notice hidden weapons. Most importantly, how to appear completely harmless. That was her greatest weapon. A smile, a laugh, a casual conversation. German officers rarely imagined that the cheerful Dutch teenager chatting with them could be leading them into an ambush. Her first operation came only weeks later. The resistance identified a young Wehrmacht officer who frequently wandered alone after visiting local cafes. Freddie's assignment sounded terrifyingly simple. Meet him, earn his trust, get him away from witnesses. Nothing more. The resistance would handle the rest. As evening settled over Harlem, Freddie leaned casually against her bicycle outside a quiet street. The officer noticed her almost immediately. He smiled. She smiled back. He complimented her Dutch accent. She laughed softly. The conversation felt effortless. To him, it seemed like an unexpected romantic encounter. To Freddie, every second felt like walking across thin ice. One wrong word, one suspicious glance, and she would disappear into a Gestapo prison. After several minutes, the officer suggested taking a walk. Freddie hesitated just long enough to appear shy. Then she agreed. They followed a narrow path leading toward a wooded area outside town. The officer never noticed two shadowy figures moving silently between the trees. He never saw them raise their weapons. A muffled gunshot echoed through the forest. Birds exploded into the evening sky. Freddie didn't turn around. She kept walking exactly as instructed. Only after reaching the road did she finally stop. Her hands trembled. She wasn't celebrating. She had just witnessed the death of another human being. War had crossed a line from which there was no return. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she accepted another mission. The resistance quickly realized something remarkable. Freddie possessed extraordinary self-control. Fear never completely disappeared. She simply refused to let it make decisions for her. Soon, she and her older sister Truus began working alongside another young resistance fighter, a university law student with striking red hair. Confident, fearless, sharp-witted. Her name was Hannie Shaft. The three women formed one of the most effective resistance teams in occupied Holland. Although later stories sometimes exaggerated or simplified individual missions, historians agree they carried out sabotage, transported weapons, distributed illegal newspapers, and assisted in armed resistance against Nazi occupation. Each woman brought different strengths. Truus was calm under pressure. Henny excelled at planning. Freddie blended into crowds almost effortlessly. Together, they became nearly invisible. They cycled across occupied cities carrying pistols hidden beneath groceries, explosives concealed inside shopping bags, forged identity cards tucked into bicycle frames. Every journey risked execution. German checkpoints appeared without warning. Random searches became increasingly common. One rainy afternoon, Freddie approached a bridge where several German soldiers had stopped every cyclist. One by one, bags were opened, packages inspected, people questioned. She quietly tightened her grip on the handlebars. Hidden beneath a bundle of vegetables lay a loaded pistol. The soldier motioned her forward. Open the basket. Freddie smiled politely. My mother will be angry if dinner gets cold. The soldier rolled his eyes. He pushed aside the vegetables with one hand. For one terrifying second, his fingers rested inches above the hidden weapon. Another officer shouted something from across the bridge. Distracted, he waved Freddie onward. She pedaled away without looking back. Only after turning the next corner did she realize tears were running down her face. Luck wouldn't protect her forever. By 1944, the German occupation had become increasingly brutal. Public executions, mass arrests, entire neighborhoods searched. The Gestapo had begun hunting resistance cells with relentless determination. Informants were everywhere. One careless conversation could destroy an entire network. Then, something happened that terrified the resistance more than any German patrol. One of their own contacts disappeared. No explanation, no message, no body, only silence. Within days, safe houses were abandoned, meetings canceled, weapons moved overnight. Everyone feared the same possibility. Had someone talked? Or had the Gestapo finally discovered the girls who had spent years operating right beneath their noses? The answer was already moving toward them, and this time, There would be nowhere left to hide. The silence was the most frightening part. No gunfire. No explosions. No warning. Just empty chairs at secret meetings. Missing faces. And whispers that someone had been taken alive. Freddie had survived dozens of missions. But she understood one terrifying truth. The longer anyone survived inside the resistance, the greater the chance they would eventually make a mistake. By late 1944, the Gestapo had intensified its hunt. Roadblocks multiplied. House-to-house searches became routine. Anyone carrying forged documents faced immediate execution. Yet the resistance refused to stop. Neither did Freddie. She and Truus now carried out increasingly dangerous sabotage missions. Railway lines were damaged to delay German troop movements. Bridges were quietly prepared for demolition. Supply vehicles mysteriously disappeared. Every successful operation made the occupying forces more desperate. Every failure meant someone never came home. Then came one of the darkest chapters of the occupation. The Nazis began publicly executing resistance members as a warning. Bodies were left hanging in town squares. Posters declared the punishment for helping the underground. Instead of creating fear, it strengthened Freddie's resolve. If we stop now, she quietly told Truus one evening, then they win. But another name had begun appearing on Gestapo reports. Henny Schaft, the young law student with the unmistakable red hair, had become one of the Nazis' most wanted resistance fighters. Her photograph circulated among German security units. Roadblocks specifically searched for women matching her description. Freddie pleaded with Hanny to dye her hair permanently. For a while, she did. But eventually, she returned to her natural color. Some historians believe she felt constantly changing her appearance had become impossible as surveillance tightened. Others believe she simply refused to let fear define her. Whatever the reason, the danger grew. In March 1945, only weeks before the war in the Netherlands would end, Henny was stopped at a German checkpoint while carrying illegal newspapers and a concealed pistol. The soldiers searched her belongings. This time, luck didn't intervene. She was arrested immediately. Freddie and Truus desperately hoped she might survive interrogation. Instead, on April 17, 1945, Henny Schaft was taken to the dunes near Bloemendal. She was executed by German officers, just 18 days before the liberation of the Netherlands. When Freddie learned the news, she said almost nothing. The loss was too heavy for words. The woman who had fought beside her for years was gone. Yet even then, the sisters continued working, because the occupation hadn't ended. Not yet. Finally, May 1945 arrived. German forces surrendered. Dutch cities erupted into celebration. Flags hidden for 5 long years suddenly appeared from windows. Church bells rang freely again. Children danced through streets once patrolled by occupying soldiers. For most people, the nightmare was over. For Freddie, it was only beginning in another way. Peace brought memories. Faces she could never forget. The officers she had lured into the forest. The resistance friends who never returned. The civilians murdered during the occupation. For decades after the war, Freddie rarely spoke publicly about her missions. When journalists asked whether she had personally lured Nazi officers to their deaths, she answered with remarkable honesty. We were soldiers. She rejected attempts to portray her as an assassin or an action hero. War, she insisted, had forced impossible choices upon ordinary people. She carried those choices for the rest of her life. Freddie married, raised a family, lived quietly. Many neighbors had little idea they were living beside one of the youngest female resistance fighters in Europe. Only much later did historians begin recognizing the extraordinary courage of Freddie, Truus, and Hanny. Schools were named in their honor. Memorials were built. Documentaries uncovered stories hidden for generations. In interviews during her later years, Freddie often reminded younger audiences that courage wasn't the absence of fear. She admitted she had been frightened constantly. Every mission, every checkpoint, every knock at the door. The difference was simple. She refused to let fear decide her actions. When Freddie Oversteegen passed away in 2018 at the age of 92, the Netherlands remembered far more than a resistance fighter. They remembered a teenage girl who should have been worrying about school, but instead chose to risk everything for freedom. She never wore medals into battle. She never commanded an army. She carried a bicycle, a quiet smile, and extraordinary courage. History often celebrates the generals who won wars. But sometimes, The future is changed by a 16-year-old girl waiting beside a lonely road, convincing evil that it had nothing to fear, until it was too late.